both aspects of anything, good and bad, exist inside anything. And if you only focus on one aspect of an experience, you're missing the big picture. So even though I went to jail and I was interrogated and tortured in 7 different detention centers, I am one of the people that made it out alive. Many others didn't. Those are the unfortunate people. I am lucky.
Welcome back to another episode of the Succeed Against the Odds Show. Today, as my guest, I have the privilege to have with me a very, very special person, Mohammed Alsaleh. Welcome to my show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this really awesome welcome.
Well, Mohammed, I had the privilege to hear you speak on the TEDxStanleyPark stage. And I had no idea what you were going to be speaking about. I did see a little bit of, introduction in the program, and I kind of had an idea, but I had not even a remote idea, really, of what you were going to talk about and what you shared. And it was mind-boggling to hear your story. And it's truly an honor to have you here, honestly, because not necessarily because of what your story is, because I know there are a lot of other people who've gone through similar stories, but because of who you are after the story, the integrity and the kindness that just exudes from you.
Thank you.
So I kind of gather that a lot of our audience may not know who you are. So would you be willing to share with our audience, you can tell our audience who you are, give us a little bit of background and what got you onto the TEDx
For
stage?
sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for all your awesome and kind and beautiful words. I mean, just to receive this means that I've done a very good job on the stage, and I couldn't be more thankful for your words and for you to be there and then invite me to talk to you and to your audience. The honor is mine. So thank you so much for that. But yeah, so my name is Mohammed Alsaleh. I am a Syrian Canadian advocate. I do advocacy work for human rights and refugees. But I am also a refugee myself. 3 years ago, I found myself a refugee in a city called Vancouver. I promise you, I didn't know anything about Vancouver or Canada other than the basics, the maple leaf, oh Canada, and the red flag. But coming here as a refugee was not easy because it's a really tough transition. So for me, back when I was in Syria, I was a medical student and I had different dreams. My dream was to find a cure for cancer, to do what I can to address that, to address this issue because it affected me on a personal level, losing my favorite cousin. And I was a 4th-year medical student when I had to leave my country. So I found myself in Vancouver, and the first thing I tried to do is go back to my medical training. But I found out, like many immigrants, I can't really transfer my credits, and I can't really transfer the 4 years of medical training that I have from Syria. And if I want to do that, then you have to do it from scratch. And I was like, okay, let me think about it. It was a shock.
That would be devastating
It
because
was
you had
really-
dedicated so much time. You were based on your story, and I actually encourage our audience to watch. We will have the link to the talk that you did. We'll have that in the show notes. But just to, like, you were so dedicated to wanting to be a doctor and in your studies, and then after 4 years you find that you have to start from scratch again. That would be devastating just about anybody who
It
has
was
put
so
their heart
hard
and
to
soul.
receive. It
Yeah.
was so hard to receive this information, and especially, starting from scratch means, in my case, basically going back to high school and then getting a degree of any kind, and then compete to enter med school. So in total, that's 10 to 15 years. So when you know that I have my mom and my siblings who are still refugees that I have to support, you know that doing that, it's not for me. But does that mean that I have to give up or just lose hope? No, for me, that was all part of redefining everything in life. Because when you are a refugee, you have to pretty much redefine everything and re-question everything that you know in life. It starts with home, because home is a concept that I think is now I view it differently from what I used to. Growing up, home was always connected to a place, physical location, the geography. That was home to me. But after being displaced and coming to Canada, now I don't define home in that way. Home to me right now is people, is community, is the people that you choose to involve with and connect with. That's his home. And that, I think that's how I was able to reconcile this concept. But back to what I was mentioning about redefining everything, also my goals. So although I wanted to treat cancer and I was so focused on it, I realized that I was originally focused on helping others, and all I wanted to do is saving other lives. I lost my cousin, but I can help save other lives. So thinking about that, I thought that, well, I can't do that right now. I might be able to do it in the future. But currently, does that mean I can't save lives or I can't do anything? No. And that's why from maybe my third or fourth month here in Canada, I started volunteering. I started doing a lot of awareness work, public speaking. I wanted to use all the available opportunities to contribute to the same goal, but in other ways. So I ended up speaking a lot in public. 3 years ago, I didn't have very good English. My English was so broken.
You're doing quite well.
Thank you so much. But honestly, the first conversation that I had was on my first day here in Canada, and it was at a Starbucks. I can tell you all about it later. But it was very tough. I mean, to reconstruct a sentence in your head from Arabic, and then finding the English vocabulary, and then thinking about what tense am I using. It was, oh my God.
Did you say things that meant something different than what you meant?
Well, okay, let me tell you a funny story. In Syria, and I think pretty much in many other countries, you get a lot of English training. I mean, in my case, I had an English class every week, like from grade 5 until graduation. A lot of English work, but even the teachers do not speak English. So you're basically being taught English in Arabic. So what we learned was,
You're learning English and Arabic. Okay.
so you have a person, my friends told me that this is how they are teaching French here. I don't know. I
I
haven't been
don't
in
know because I'm not from here either.
but I
So
was told that they teach they teach French in English here. So we were taught English in Arabic there, and it was pretty much like, well, a door means this, and a window means that, and so a lot of vocabulary, a lot of grammar. Like if you want to make a question, look for an auxiliary. If you don't have one, create one, and then move it to the very beginning. You have a question. But did we actually ask each other questions? I promise you we didn't.
there was no conversation.
Exactly. So, having that into consideration, I had a lot of awkward moments.
I identify with that. I'm from Italy, so I had to learn to speak English when I was a teenager. I kind of went through that same the same process, so I understand. However, I didn't have to learn a whole different type of alphabet, because your alphabet is different. But you already knew that because of school, so that's kind of a little bit of an advantage.
That was good. And also there, my way of supplementing this really dysfunctional educational system was via listening to English music or watching a lot of Hollywood movies. That was my way of kind of getting a sense how the heck do we use this language. But also because of that, and on English and making mistakes and all that. Hollywood have a lot of influence, as you know, so a lot of slang, but also a lot of cultural competency issues where you just think that the entire continent of North America is a copy of Los Angeles or another copy of New York, and you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really interesting to
then you find out it's not, right?
It's not.
It's not. Okay, so now you said when you mentioned your mom was not, you came here by yourself and your family stayed back?
Yes.
So how was that process?
So
how did you manage to come before they did? Like, how was that process?
Well, one thing about me, I am super lucky. Sometimes I think that I'm the luckiest person alive.
Okay, now I'm going to pause you right there, because when I heard your story on the TED stage, I was like, that didn't sound like luck. What happened to you when you were back in Syria?
Depends on how
you look at it, and I want to get to that. I want to get to that. But anyway, I just want to say that it's an amazing mindset that you have to say that. So I apologize for interrupting you, but I needed to point that out because it's amazing. Your story is just incredible.
Thank you. Well, no, absolutely. I appreciate what you're saying. But let me defend my point. Because although I've had to literally see the darkest side of humanity. But luck for me is the lessons that I've learned and got out of these experiences.
Wow.
So back to your question.
Wow.
Thank you.
Wow.
I've had to flee Syria, or before we even get to that, I come from, according to Canadian standards, I come from a larger family. My mom and me and my 5 siblings. I am the oldest. We lost my father really long time ago in 1999. He died of a heart attack, and then my mom, who was 30 back then, was responsible for me and my 5 siblings. I was the oldest. I was 10. So my mom is a real fighter, and I said in my talk, she taught me how to be a survivor. She made sure that we don't need anything. She made sure that we get the best opportunities, the best education. So me, her oldest, having my dream of treating cancer, she supported me all the way into college or university, where I ended up studying at the Faculty of Medicine, and so for my other siblings. But because I had to, because I wanted to study medicine, I had to move to another city that had a Faculty of Medicine. So back then, that was the first time I left my the family home, and I ended up studying in Homs. Homs is a central city in Syria. It is the Winnipeg of Syria, really central, the transportation hub for the country, and it reminds me of Winnipeg as well, because it's the center for the arts community in Syria as well. So I moved there, and my family stayed back in Al-Hasake, which is a city in the northeast part of the country. So if you're familiar with the map, it's bordered with Iraq and Turkey, that corner of Syria. 7 hours of 7 hours of busing and many a lot of distance was between us. So that was our plan. I wanted to finish college, go back to my home Syrian tried to be an oncologist there. But life had other plans for us. The Syrian uprising erupted, and the Arab Spring came to Syria. And that's, this background story is necessary to explain what happened to our family. Because the conflict and the uprising, or the uprising that turned into a conflict, have affected or have made half of the pre-war population of 23 million, have made half of them refugees, including me and my family. But I think one of the very important aspects of the refugee experience is losing the control over your life, and losing the ability to make decisions, because things are just coming your way and you have to respond to them. So back to our example, I was living in Homs city, and Homs city was one of the very first cities to be affected by the war. So for me, and I'm sorry for this long story,
No,
but
it's
I think
okay.
it's really necessary. The dreams that we have shape the reality that we live. And my dream to be a doctor turned into a bigger dream with the Syrian uprising of being a doctor in a free country, in a free society. So all I wanted to do back then is to contribute to this immediate uprising, do my part into being the change I want to see. And I started demonstrating. I started being out of the streets and calling for freedom, and shooting the demonstrations and uploading them online, because that was my contribution to that big cause, which will enhance my future and my people's future. But the dictatorship that, and any dictatorship would have the same mindset, which is trading freedom with security and safety. So if you are okay with my rules, you're safe. But if you dare question my authority, you lose your security. And that's basically what happened in Syria. The government sent the army to the streets, cracked down on the uprising, and started arresting anybody who's participating in it. So for me, you know, yeah, I know why you say I'm not super lucky, because I ended up being arrested for 3 times, and in my short lifetime, I've visited 7 different detention centers, and I've had an experience where I literally saw the darkest side of humanity, and I still have scars, both physical and mental, from that experience. After surviving that, I fled Syria to Lebanon, and I found myself a refugee there. But my family were still living in that other city, my home town of Al-Hasaki, and they were there, and the conflict was not as bad there. So we didn't even think that they would need to leave the country. Days go by, and I get an amazing opportunity from Canada to be considered for asylum, and I arrived to Vancouver, BC in November 2014 as part of the first group of Syrian refugees ever. I mean, back then only 28 people made it to BC in 2014, and I was one of them. So I think that's why I say that I am the luckiest person alive, because each bad experience doesn't end there, and life. I'm really a big fan of Taoism, where I'm not sure if this is the English name, but in Arabic it's called Taoism. Yeah, Taoism.
Taoism.
It is. I'm just confirming. I'm an ESL person at the end of the day. Sorry about that.
Me too. We're good.
Where both aspects of anything, good and bad, exist inside anything. And if you only focus on one aspect of any experience, you're missing the big picture. So even though I went to jail and I was interrogated and tortured in 7 different detention centers, I am one of the people that made it out alive. Many others didn't. Those are the unfortunate people. I am lucky. Becoming a refugee, I was one of the 14 million people that from Syria that became refugees. But I'm also one of the lucky ones that were able to come to Canada, and I was one of the very first ones. So that is my approach when it comes to looking at the full half of the cup, and that is also the story of how my family is now scattered across 3 countries. Where I'm here, 2 of my siblings ended up being refugees in Germany, and they actually had to make the same perilous journey on the boat from Turkey to Greece and then crossing 7 different international borders illegally. And then finally, my mom and my remaining siblings fled our city after ISIS invaded the city and took control of almost half of it. That's when we realized that it's unavoidable. And that brings us to now, trying to reunite in Canada.
So, if you don't mind me asking, and please only share what you're comfortable with, because
sure.
I know it's probably not very good memories. If we could go back to the time when you were arrested, when you were in jail, you said you were in 3 different prisons.
3 different arrests.
3 different arrests, but 7 different prisons, correct?
Yes.
So I apologize for that.
No worries.
While you were going through that time, because I know you said you're a fan of tourism, and you're looking at both sides of, there's the good and the bad. There's got to be another side to everything.
Right.
However, when you're in a situation where you're being tortured, what keeps your mind strong? What goes through your mind while you're going through that? Did you have moments where you're just like, this is it? I mean, you're human, right? Like, was there any time where you just crumbled?
I had many times
Yeah.
where I wished for death and contemplated the thought of ending this
Yeah.
with the easiest, foreseeable solution, which is, ending my own life.
So what prevented that?
But the only thing that kept me going were my family, were all the memories that I have with my mom and with my siblings, and thinking about them is the only thing that kept me going. I had many times where I literally thought again to kill myself and to end this suffering. But then I thought about it, and I was just thinking about what does that mean for them? What does that mean? Because for them on the other side, they know that I have disappeared and that I am in some prison somewhere, and I was confident that they are actively looking for me. So what does that mean to them? To lose me forever and to affect them in a way that can never be solvable? Because I think the scars, both physical and mental, will disappear, and time can heal everything. But death cannot be cured with time. And that's why death is not an option for anything. That's why I think, the and it all ties to the conversation about the execution as a way of of uh, of justice. I don't think that's justice. And I don't want to go there, actually.
It's okay. It's okay. You don't have to go there.
But let me just share with you some of the moments from inside that prison, because the unknown is the biggest fear. At the moment when you are being beaten, or when you are being hung by the ceiling, or whatever is happening to you, that's only one moment of your life. And when it's happening, it's not a big deal. Believe me, I've had a lot of bad moments when I was, you know, one of the interrogation sessions. It didn't end. It only ended when I lost 3 toenails. So at the time, there is enough adrenaline that can come out of you to deal with that moment. But what's coming next? What's happening after this interrogation session? Or when you're suddenly summoned by them and you're taken somewhere. You don't know, are they going to execute you, or are they going to torture you, or are they going to move you to another place? The unknown was the biggest fear. And to know that there is somebody on the other side waiting for you, somebody that can give you a hug, that can make you forget all of that, is what kept me going. I owe my life to my family. One, because they were my energy and they were the only reason that I could endure and wait to make it to the other side, just to see them, just to hug them, just to tell them how much I love them. And for two, because they never gave up on me. They looked for me. They found me. After being interrogated in 7 different detention centers and moved everywhere, I was arrested in Homs, but I was, I was released from Damascus. They found me, and they sold the family house, and they paid a lot of money and bribes to get me out. For this and for that, I owe my life to them. And right now, their lives are on hold. They are living in such terrible circumstances where they are scattered all across the world, and the only source of support is me and what I can send from Canada. And I can't wait for an end for that, just for them to have a proper life. We're not asking for anything but a normal life that they can have.
So your mom and all your siblings are in Germany, or just your mom and some of your siblings? What can others do to help the situation? How can we help your family? We're here. Might as well. If there is a way that we can help, what can be done to make the process?
Well, let me tell you a short story about one amazing story, or let me say another amazing story from Canada and from Canadian experience. So 1 year after I came to Canada, so I came here late 2014. So late 2015 in December. That's when my family became refugees. My two youngest brothers, fled that part of Syria where we lived, because pretty much all the fighting factions were recruiting males to serve with their militias and stuff. So they fled the city to Turkey. From Turkey, they took a boat to Greece. Luckily, they made it, unlike little Alan Kurdi. And then crossing 7 different borders illegally, they made it to Germany. A month later or so, my mom and my remaining siblings had to flee the city because ISIS infiltrated the city, and now they have control of half of it. And then, they needed to do something, so they crossed the borders between Syria and Turkey. And suddenly, I find myself in a situation where, even though my family lived inside of Syria and were threatened pretty much all the time, but there was a sense of comfort in the fact that they have a roof, above their heads, and they are still inside their home and their country. But when that happened, I was devastated, and I didn't really know what to do. It was also the time in Canada where the refugee crisis was at its peak. Alan Kurdi was linked to Canada by the fact that his aunt lives here in Coquitlam, and the discussion, the conversation came home. So I was interviewed by a reporter about my experience, about pretty much everything that we talked about today, and there was this exact question: how, what can be done to help your family come to Canada? So I answered that question by saying I've done a lot of research and I've read about how the refugee system work here, and there are a lot of ways to sponsor refugees and bring them to Canada, but one of the ways is called a group of five, where 5 Canadians come together to sponsor a refugee family. And my answer was, I don't even know 5 Canadians. And that was, when you're a refugee in a new country, that is, that's one of the easiest, I would call them one of the easy obstacles, as compared to the other big things that you have to do. But anyways, back to what I was mentioning, after a while I get a request to connect with somebody who read the story, and her name is Dina Brennitzel. She's now my best friend in Canada, and now I call her my Canadian mom. But she was like, well, I can't bring your family here, but I can introduce you to 5 Canadians. She invites me to her place, and then we have coffee together, and now I know 5 Canadians.
Well, you must know more than 5 Canadians now.
I know many Canadians now, and I'm so happy that I am here among Canadians. I love Canadians. Oh my God. But so just to finish that piece, because what came out of that meeting is actually a suggestion by Dina, by my best friend in Canada, of maybe fundraising, maybe doing a fundraiser where we try to sponsor the family, and we worry about the 5 Canadians and the other pieces together. If we are successful, we bring
Canadians
the family
for
here.
each member of your family?
For each family unit.
For a whole family unit.
Yeah, okay. Actually, because of the fact that I did a lot of research and then I sponsor my own family, that is actually what I do for a job right now. And maybe we can talk about this later. But right now, I am the private sponsorship trainer for BC. So anybody who's interested in private sponsorship of refugees or anything that has to do with private...
so that's how you're helping people now.
That's what I do for a job right now. But I said, yes, let's do it. We started a fundraiser, an online link on GoFundMe. We called it Syrian Family Rescue, Reunite a Syrian Family in Canada. And we started asking Canadians for help because the first step to do that was money. And the outpouring, generous response was overwhelming and heartwarming, because in 20 days, we raised enough money to sponsor my family.
Oh, so they're coming, or they're already here?
So they're coming very soon. This is a really long way to answer your question, but...
well, it's been a long journey.
It is.
And you can't answer a long journey with just a little sentence, so it's good.
And that's actually part of my TED Talk. Oh my God, a spoiler, sorry guys.
No, it's different. Your talk was amazing, so you got to watch it. Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we were successful in building a sponsorship application where we raised enough money to sponsor the family. We found a sponsor, and the only, down to this whole thing is the long processing time, because we pretty much had enough money in 2015 and now it's 2018 and they're not here yet, but we got the approval that everything looks good, and we're gonna have them joining us here very soon. And I'm actually planning to have a welcome party of some sort at the airport, so flags, signs.
Nice.
If you're interested, you can join us.
I'm
gonna announce it on social media.
You'll have to let us know.
For sure.
Is there a social media that we can follow?
Absolutely. So you can find me on pretty much all platforms. So just
we'll
find Mohammed Alsaleh.
Anyway,
have them somewhere there.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna announce it there. And when I came here, uh, I didn't have anybody. Uh, there was only one guy with a sign that says Mohammed Alsaleh. So I walked to him and it's like, that's me. You must be looking for me.
Mm-hmm.
But he told me three words that changed pretty much my perception and my experience. He said, "Welcome to Canada." And with that welcome, these words were repeated pretty much anytime I met anybody. So, you know, maybe the second conversation I had was at that Starbucks. That's, the one that I refer to my first official conversation in Canada, where, it's funny because I was looking for coffee, but I didn't really realize that here we have it so complicated.
It is complicated.
It's so complicated to order at a Starbucks
It's
at
not
the
just a
first time
coffee.
ever. No, it's like you have to, there's a lot of chinos that end with like the frappuccino and cappuccino and mochaccino, and then you have to tell the barista how big you want it, and then whether you like sugar or not. This 3-4 stages of ordering coffee
In
was
Syria,
something.
it's just coffee.
You just walk and
Just
you
like
said,
in Italy.
"Can I have coffee?"
Just have cafe,
It's like,
right?
"Welcome,
Just have a
here's your
Here's your
coffee."
coffee. There's no sizes. We make things
Oh my
complicated
God.
here.
But there, the barista was like, "Okay, what kind of coffee?" I was like, like coffee? It's like, "We have cappuccino, we have frappuccino, we have a lot of chinos." And then she's like, "What size?" But she guided me through that. And then she's asking me like, "Where are you from?" So I told her, "I'm from Syria. I just arrived yesterday." And she's like, "Oh my God, welcome to Canada." And so, with this sentiment, with welcoming others and with being so open to, having others here and also understanding their challenges and trying to accommodate it, my life changed. 3 years ago, I didn't really speak much English, and now I am a TEDx speaker. I'm actually a 2-time TEDx speaker. I have 2 talks now.
2 talks.
So the one that you've seen live is
Yes.
my second one, and I also provided a different talk in September 2017. It's also available on YouTube, and it's mainly actually focused on hope and how I was able to maintain hope and the power of hope in general. Whereas the one that I'm not gonna spoil for you guys is about the global refugee. The one that we're mentioning today is about the global. Sorry about my English. Oh my God, about the global refugee crisis and the way that I view it and the way that I would like people to look at it. Because at the end of the day, in my opinion, refugees are the outcome of many problems, and they are not a problem per se. And to try to solve the refugee crisis, even though I'm not really claiming to, that I can solve it or anybody can, but the way to start to address it is by looking at the root causes that are making people refugees. And by watching my talk, you're gonna see what I mean with that.
So your family's experience, where they are now, was it similar to yours? Is yours here? You were very welcome. You felt totally embraced, from what I'm getting, right? People
Oh yeah.
People just loved you. Just, you're safe now. You're with us. We're good. Did your family get the same where they went?
Well,
they get the same?
It's every because we are scattered as a family in 3 different countries. So here in Canada, I received this awesome welcome. Everybody was so welcoming. But also, I recognize that here in Canada, we are talking about a way less number of refugees that come here compared to Germany, where my siblings are, or to Turkey, where the rest of my family is. So based on that, and let's talk about my siblings who are in Germany. They made it there in late 2015, but until today, until 2018, they don't have status. They are still in the process. But I also recognize that the government of Germany is dealing with an influx of 1 million people, whereas in Turkey,
And it's a smaller country than Canada.
It is.
So it's kind of like it's been flooded.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, 1 million people, I think. Although they are a huge nation in terms of population, I think it's tough because, I visited there in October, by the way. And that was the first time I see my siblings and my family for 4 years.
Oh, that must have been so good.
Yeah, oh my God. But when I was there, and I was there at a very critical night, the night of the elections.
Oh boy.
Oh my God. Well, this last elections in Germany was the first elections where Nazis make it to parliament. It was a really, what is the word? I don't know what I can't find a word to describe that night, but there was a lot of electricity.
Tension?
And tension in that night. Why? Because I was just thinking about my siblings and the other million Syrian refugees that are there, and how what happens tomorrow would define their future, and also for Germans and people who live there who might wake up to a Nazi government or whatever.
Yeah.
And the next morning we found out that they actually had some seats and made it. I don't know. Politics are so crazy. Let's not go there.
We won't go there.
So having and being the person that I am, where I take everything into consideration and have a balanced view, I think refugees are welcomed in different ways in all these three countries. Because even though my siblings still don't have a refugee status, or there's nothing that they're still in the pipeline, but they were offered shelter, they were welcome, they were there was something for them. Also for my mother and my other siblings in Turkey, they were given temporary protection, access to healthcare, but because that country is overwhelmed with an influx of 3 million people, even more now, there isn't a lot of, beside that, there isn't a lot of support. So it's my job right now to support and provide. And, in my opinion, the hardest thing in all of this was having to maintain ongoing monthly support for my family, because Canadians were so generous, and they generously helped me raise enough funds to sponsor my family. But these funds are still in the bank. It's been years and they are still not used. But in the meantime, it's my job to provide and support. And that's why I say it's the most challenging part, because even though I work full-time and I relatively earn better than when I first started working, but I still live month to month. And it's not a big deal. I'm not really, I just can't wait for this to end, because it's chronic suffering and chronic limbo for them.
And they're going to be coming soon.
And hopefully we're going to have them soon.
And then we're going to have them all back in the show.
Yeah.
And we're going to have the whole family.
I would love to bring them here.
Yes.
We're going to need a lot of chairs here.
Yes, we'll do the whole chairs. No worries. Well, Mohammed, this has been absolutely amazing to have you here, to have you share your story, go into some of the details that I know were not the most pleasant, but I think it's important for people to know that, it's sometimes we tend to ignore, like we hear the stories, but we don't really know what's going on, and you just gave us a tiny little glimpse.
Thank you.
And I think it's important to hear your story and other refugee stories, wherever they may be, so that everyone comes from a kind heart position and a more understanding, versus, oh, here's somebody that just came from another country and now they're getting help. Because I know that there has been that attitude in some other countries. I have seen that. Like I said, I am from Italy. My family's still back there, and I know there are a lot of refugees there as well. And it's not just Syrian refugees. There are people coming from all over from all kinds of areas. And I know there's a lot of pressure. There is tension within the country because of that. And I think part of it is because there is this misunderstanding. There's not, they just don't know,
Mm-hmm.
right? But then we have people like you that come out and talk and speak and share the stories. Like, well, you're human just like we are. So it's
Yes.
important to hear these stories.
And I think it's related to the way our brains are wired, because we can't handle statistics and big numbers, and it's really hard for us to relate to in that way, and the media is not doing a good job. When you were just seeing in the news, well, there's 65 million refugees in the world today, and you just hear that and you just label everybody with the same label, and then it's really hard to relate to that in that way.
Yeah.
But when you have a human face, a personal story, I always say that the best way to know people is to meet them, and having that human aspect is our maybe gateway into understanding the amount of what it means that there are 65 million people that are refugees. They are 65 million individuals who have dreams, who dreamt of being doctors, or who had completely other things.
Exactly,
and now
putting an identity to that number instead of just this big human.
And think
number.
about 65 million dreams that are crushed, 60 million lives that are in limbo. That's the least that we can say.
Yeah.
But you know what? At the end of the day, I think it's really important to embrace change, whether if it was good or bad. Being able to embrace it is maybe the first step toward making sense of it. So even though in my case, let's look at me, even though I found myself in a city that I don't know anything about, a city that speaks a language that I don't really speak, 3 years later, I mastered the language. I'm actually a TEDx speaker. I couldn't really go back to becoming a doctor, but I am fighting other sorts of cancer right now. Right now, I'm really proud, and even beyond proud. I'm just, yeah, I'm proud. And if there is, maybe you can tell me if there is a better word. And sorry about my English for the third time, but I'm so proud of what we have here in Canada, because it's not perfect. I'm not claiming that it is, but it is closer to perfection than many other places. And I love Canada. I love Canada. I love Canadians. I can't wait to become a Canadian. Soon I will, by the way.
Congratulations.
I've been here for 3 years, so I can't wait to join Canada officially.
3 years. I had to wait 3 years too. I actually waited longer than that, but yeah, it took me that long too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here, for sharing your story, and I'm looking forward to meeting your family when your family comes. I really want to meet your family.
Thank you so much for inviting me. You are invited.
We're all invited.
You guys are invited. Everybody's invited.
You can come from wherever you are, whatever country you're in. Just come on up. Come.
And we'll have a refugees welcome party in the honor of my family at the airport.
We're looking forward to it.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you again.
Thank you.